I am 93 years old. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because time has stripped me of every illusion you are still living inside. I have buried my friends. I have buried my enemies. I have buried the version of myself that thought later was real. And now, standing this close to the end, I can see something you cannot. You are living like you have time. You don't. When you are young, time feels polite. It waits. It feels endless. You treat days like spare change in your pocket. I used to do the same. You wake up. You rush. You complain. You postpone joy. You tell yourself lies so comfortable they feel like truth. I'll start when things slow down. I'll fix it when I'm more stable. I'll live when I'm ready. Let me be very clear with you. You will never be ready. Life does not slow down. And tomorrow is not promised. I have watched men stronger than you collapse in grocery stores. I have watched women smarter than you disappear between one breath and the next. No warning. No countdown. Just gone. And yet you live as if death is an abstract idea. Something that happens to other people. Old people. Unlucky people. Not you. That belief is the most dangerous thing you own. Because it makes you careless with the only currency that matters. Your time. You trade it for money you don't need. For approval that doesn't last. For comfort that slowly kills you. You scroll through your life. You numb yourself. You postpone the hard conversations. You delay the dreams that scare you. And you call this being responsible. It isn't. It's fear wearing a professional suit. I know, because I wore it for decades. I told myself I was being practical. I told myself I was being patient. I told myself I was being smart. What I was really doing was waiting. Waiting to live. Waiting to feel. Waiting to matter. Waiting to live. Waiting to feel. Waiting to matter. And one day, I looked in the mirror and realized the waiting had become my life. No one tells you this when you're young. Time doesn't feel fast while it's happening. It only feels fast when you look back. Years don't announce themselves. They slip by quietly while you're busy being busy. One day you're 30. Then suddenly you're 50. Then suddenly, people stop calling. Your phone gets quieter. Your circle gets smaller. Your body stops negotiating. And that's when the truth hits you like cold water. Most of your life is already behind you. You don't regret the risks you took. You regret the ones you were too afraid to take. You don't regret loving too hard. You regret staying silent. You don't regret failing. You regret never trying. I am not here to scare you. I am here because I wish someone had scared me earlier. If this message makes you uncomfortable, good. Comfort is what kept you asleep. Listen to me carefully. You are not stuck. You are not late. But you are running out of time faster than you think. And if you keep living the way you are living now, you will wake up one day with regrets louder than your memories. This is not motivation. This is a warning. And I'm only getting started that I used to believe in later more than I believed in myself. Later was my religion. Later was my excuse. Later was the soft pillow I put under every uncomfortable truth so I could sleep at night. I told myself I would be present later. I would slow down later. I would repair relationships later. I would chase meaning later. I would live later. And every time I said later, time quietly took something from me without asking permission. One conversation disappeared. One opportunity closed. One version of myself died without a funeral. You don't notice it happening while you're inside it. That's the trick. Life doesn't steal loudly. It steals politely, one ordinary day at a time, while you're distracted by deadlines, notifications, and plans that assume tomorrow is guaranteed. I remember thinking I had so much runway left. I remember thinking 50 was old. I am, with a body that no longer cooperates, memories sharper than my future, and a silence around me that only arrives when the noise of ambition finally shuts up. You think you're busy because your life is important. Most of the time, you're busy because you're afraid to sit still long enough to hear what your soul has been trying to tell you for years. Silence scares you because silence exposes truth. In silence, you realize you're not happy where you are. In silence, you realize the ladder you're climbing is leaning against the wrong wall. In silence, you realize you're trading your best hours for things that won't matter when your hands start shaking and your nights get shorter. So you stay busy. You call it hustle. You call it discipline. You call it responsibility. But underneath it, there's fear. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of starting over. Fear of admitting you chose wrong. I see it in your generation clearly because I lived it fully. You measure your worth in productivity. You feel guilty resting. You feel anxious doing nothing. You feel valuable only when you're exhausted. That is not strength. The conditioning. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that your value comes from output, not existence. So you push and push and push, promising yourself a reward in a future that keeps moving further away. Let me tell you something uncomfortable from a man who has reached the end. No one shows up to applaud your sacrifice. The world does not keep score the way you think it does. You imagine a moment where it all makes sense, where someone says it was worth it. That moment rarely comes. Instead, what comes is a quiet realization that you postponed joy for too long, and joy moved on without you. I watched men retire and die within a year because they had nothing left inside them once the noise stopped. Their entire identity was borrowed from their job, and when the job was gone, so were they. You think your title makes you someone. It doesn't. Title is. Louder than hope. What followed me were moments, conversations, regrets, faces, the sound of laughter I didn't stay long enough to hear, the arguments I thought I had time to fix, the apologies I rehearsed but never delivered. You think there will be a clean moment to do the important things. There won't be. Life is messy until the end. You don't get a pause button. You don't get a perfect window. You only get now, imperfect and demanding your courage. I used to believe success would feel like arrival. It never did. It felt like maintenance. The moment you hit one goal, another replaced it. The hunger never stopped because hunger was never about the goal. It was about avoiding emptiness. And when I finally stopped running, I realized the emptiness I feared was actually clarity. Clarity hurts at first. It forces you to confront how much time you spent running in circles. How many decisions were made out of fear instead of truth? How many years you gave away cheaply? You don't run out of time all at once. You leak it. You leak it through distractions. You leak it through resentment. You leak it through waiting for permission. You leak it through chasing approval from people who are just as lost as you are. And one day you look back and realize the leak emptied the tank. I am not telling you to quit everything or burn your life down. I am telling you to stop lying to yourself about later. Later is not a plan. Later is avoidance. Later is how dreams quietly die without drama. If something matters to you, it deserves space in your life now, not after you've exhausted yourself proving something to people who won't remember the effort. You think you have time to fix relationships later. You don't. People age. People harden. People leave. I have stood over graves wishing for one more ordinary conversation. Not a dramatic one. Not a perfect one. Just one more chance to show up when it mattered. You think you'll find meaning after you reach a certain level. Meaning is not at. There is a quiet kind of damage that doesn't show up in scars or headlines. A damage that happens slowly when you stay silent about the things that matter most to you. I lived most of my life believing silence was maturity. I thought biting my tongue made me strong. I thought swallowing my feelings made me professional, respectable, reliable. What no one tells you is that silence doesn't disappear, it settles. It settles into your chest, your posture, your sleep, your tone of voice. It hardens into distance. I stayed silent when I should have said, I'm tired. I stayed silent when I should have said, I'm lonely. I stayed silent when I should have said, this life doesn't fit me anymore. And because I didn't speak, people assumed I was fine. Because I looked fine, the world kept asking for more. Silence trains others to overlook you. Worse, it trains you to overlook yourself. I learned too late that unspoken truth doesn't vanish, it mutates. It turns into resentment. It turns into bitterness disguised as sarcasm. It turns into exhaustion you can't explain. You wake up one day irritated at everyone and everything, not realizing you've been abandoning yourself for decades. I remember sitting at dinner tables nodding along to conversations I didn't care about, smiling through commitments I hated, agreeing to paths I never chose. All because I didn't want to rock the boat. Let me tell you something from the end of the road. The boat will rock anyway. Life will shake you whether you speak or not. The only difference is whether you're standing in your truth when it happens or hiding behind politeness and regret. I watched marriages decay not because of screaming fights, but because of quiet distance. Two people sitting inches apart, worlds away, both assuming the other already knows what hurts. They don't. People are not mind readers. They are busy, distracted, flawed. If you don't speak your needs, they won't magically be met. And then you blame them for not showing up. The only difference is whether you're standing in your truth when it happens or hiding behind politeness and regret. I watched marriages decay not because of screaming fights, but because of quiet distance. Two people sitting inches apart, worlds away, both assuming the other already knows what hurts. They don't. People are not mind readers. They are busy, distracted, flawed. If you don't speak your needs, they won't magically be met. And then you blame them for not showing up when you never gave them the map. I stayed silent with my children too. I thought love was understood. I thought providing was enough. I thought they know. Years later, I learned that love unsaid feels a lot like love withheld. The words you don't say don't echo later. They just disappear. And when the chance is gone, no amount of regret can resurrect them. You think there will be a better time to speak. Calmer, cleaner, safer. There isn't. Truth is rarely convenient. That's why it matters. I avoided hard conversations because I feared conflict, but conflict avoided doesn't dissolve, it compounds. It grows interest. It becomes a weight you carry everywhere. And your body keeps score. My shoulders tightened over the years. My breath became shallow. My sleep grew thin. Doctors called it stress. I call it a lifetime of unsaid things pressing down from the inside. You are not weak for needing to speak. You are not dramatic for having feelings. You are not selfish for wanting a life that feels honest. Silence doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible, first to others, then to yourself. I look back now and realize the moments that defined my life were not the achievements, but the converse avoided. The phone calls I delayed. The apologies I rehearsed, but never deliberations I'd cause. I wanted the timing to be perfect. Perfect timing is a myth people use to avoid courage. The truth is simple and terrifying. If something needs to be said, it already waited too long. Speak while the person can st. Speak while the person can still hear you. Speak while your voice still carries weight. Speak before circumstances make the decision for you. I watched people wait so long to express love that by the time they did, it landed on a closed door. Not because the other person didn't care, but because silence taught them not to expect it. Relationships don't usually end with explosions. They end with quiet resignation, with two people slowly lowering expectations until there's nothing left to reach for. And then everyone pretends it was inevitable. It wasn't. It was chosen, one unsaid sentence at a time. You think staying silent keeps the peace. It doesn't. It just delays the reckoning. And when the reckoning comes, it comes bigger, heavier, and less forgiving. I am not telling you to speak recklessly. I am telling you to speak honestly. There is a difference. Honesty can be gentle. Silence is rarely kind. If you are unhappy, say it. If you are overwhelmed, admit it. If something no longer aligns, acknowledge it. The people who truly belong in your life will adjust. The ones who don't were never going to stay anyway. I wasted years trying to be palatable to everyone, not realizing that in doing so I diluted myself into someone no one truly knew, including me. The tragedy is not that people judge you when you speak. The tragedy is that they never get the chance to know who you really are if you don't. At the end of your life, you will not regret the uncomfortable conversations you had. You will regret the truth you buried alive. Because buried truth doesn't stay buried, it haunts. And I am haunted not by the things I said, but by the words that died in my throat. Silence cost me closeness. Silence cost me peace. Silence cost me years of authenticity I can never reclaim. If you are listening to this and something inside you feels tight, that's not coincidence. That's recognition. That's the part of you that's tired of being quiet to keep things smooth. Life is not smooth. One of the most dangerous lies you will ever believe is that you are in control. I don't mean responsibility. I mean control. The idea that if you plan hard enough, work smart enough, worry enough, you can bend life into behaving. I built my entire adulthood around this illusion. Calendars packed months in advance. Goals stacked on top of goals. Backup plans for the backup plans. I believed anxiety was preparation and tension was proof that I cared. What it really was fear wearing a suit. Life does not reward control. It tolerates it for a while, then reminds you who is really in charge. It does this quietly at first, a missed opportunity, a delayed call, a relationship that cools for no obvious reason. Then it escalates. A diagnosis, a sudden loss, a phone call in the middle of the night. I spent decades gripping the wheel so tightly my hands went numb, not realizing the road was never mine. Control is comforting because it makes chaos feel manageable, but it comes at a price. When you believe you are in control, every disruption feels like failure. Every surprise feels personal. You blame yourself for storms you didn't summon. You replay moments endlessly, convinced that if you had just said something differently, arrived earlier, worked harder, loved better, the outcome would have changed. Sometimes it wouldn't have. Some things break no matter how careful you are. Some people leave no matter how much you give. Some chapters end without your permission. I learned this the hard way when my wife got sick. I did everything right. Doctors, schedules, treatments, research at 3 a.m. I thought effort could outwork mortality. It can't. When she died, something inside me cracked. Not just grief, but the collapse of the belief that if you do enough, life will cooperate. It doesn't. And once that illusion shatters, you have two choices: bitterness or surrender. Not surrender as in giving up, surrender as in acceptance. The kind that loosens your grip and lets you. Surrender as in giving up, surrender as in acceptance. The kind that loosens your grip and lets you breathe again. I spent years angry at life for not following the plan I never asked it to agree to. That anger didn't make me stronger. It made me rigid. And rigid things snap. Control made me impatient with people. I wanted timelines, guarantees, clear answers. But people are not projects. Love does not follow schedules. Healing doesn't respect deadlines. The more I tried to manage everything, the smaller my world became. Joy requires room. Wonder requires uncertainty. Presence requires letting go of what comes next. Control steals all three. I look back now and realize the moments that mattered most were never planned. They arrived unannounced. Laughter in a grocery store aisle, an unexpected conversation that changed my direction, a quiet afternoon that became a memory I still carry. None of those fit neatly into a productivity system. You don't miss life because you're lazy. You miss it because you're busy managing it. Always thinking ahead. Always bracing for impact. Always asking what's next, instead of noticing what's here. Control keeps you future-bound. Life happens in the present. When you live trying to control outcomes, you reduce people to variables and yourself to a machine that needs constant optimization. You stop trusting the flow of things. You stop listening. You stop allowing yourself to be surprised. And surprise is where meaning lives. Let me be clear, planning is useful. Responsibility matters. But control, the belief that you can secure yourself against loss, pain, embarrassment, or death, is a fantasy that quietly robs you of peace. The paradox is this: the moment I accepted I wasn't in control, I felt lighter. Not careless, not reckless, just present. I stopped asking life to guarantee happiness and started appreciating moments without demanding permanence. I stopped clinging so hard to people out of fear of losing them and started loving them without conditions. And ironically, that made my relationships deeper, not weaker. Control isolates you because it's rooted in fear. Letting go connects you because it requires trust. In yourself, in others, in the fact that you can survive uncertainty. The world will break your heart whether you plan for it or not. The difference is whether you were awake when it happened or too busy trying to manage the damage. I see so many people exhausted, not from doing too much, but from trying to control too much. Every conversation calculated. Every decision optimized. Every risk analyzed until the moment passes. Life is not a spreadsheet. It is lived forward and understood backward. You don't need to control everything to be safe. You need resilience. You need flexibility. You need the humility to accept that some chapters will hurt no matter how prepared you are. And that's not a personal failure. When I stopped trying to control how my life looked and focused instead on how it felt, things changed. I chose calm over constant achievement. I chose depth over appearance. I chose presence over prediction. And I wish I had learned this sooner. Control didn't save me time. It wasted it. It kept me tense during moments that deserved softness. It made me miss beauty because I was too busy anticipating loss. If you are listening to this and feel constantly on edge, always bracing, always planning for the worst, hear this from someone who reached the end. You don't need tighter control. You need gentler trust. Trust that you can handle what comes. Trust that not everything needs to be decided today. Trust that life can still surprise you in good ways if you stop trying to cage it. Let go of the fantasy that certainty equals safety. It doesn't. Presence does. And presence only exists when you loosen your grip. I didn't lose my peace when life fell apart. I lost it long before, when I tried to make sure it never would. Toughest. They were the most honest. They had the courage to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. They didn't confuse control with peace. I spent too long gripping my life like a clenched fist, thinking that was discipline. It was fear. When you loosen your grip, you don't lose control, you gain breath. If you're listening to this and you feel exhausted from holding everything together, this is your permission to rest without guilt, to speak without rehearsing, to admit you're human. The world will not collapse if you stop pretending, but you might finally feel it open. I reached the end of my life realizing strength isn't what you survive alone. It's what you allow yourself to survive together. Don't wait as long as I did to learn that lesson.